Living in a quiet, suburban neighborhood bordering the countryside was supposed to be peaceful. Exactly the kind of slower, less chaotic life I had wanted after years of hard ranch work. I'd saved up, sold my cattle operation in Wyoming, and bought a nice little property just on the edge of this HOA-run neighborhood. It was far enough from the city to feel like home, yet close enough to groceries, hospitals, and people who didn't wear cowboy boots every day. I figured it was a good compromise. Then I met Sandra Whitmore. She introduced herself on the first day with a plastic smile, a clipboard, and 1,000 questions. She called herself the acting president of the HOA, although it sounded more like she believed she was the mayor of a town no one elected her to run. Sandra was in her mid-60s, always dressed like she was attending a charity gala, and had the type of tone that made everything sound like a veiled insult. Even when she said welcome, she commented on the trailer I had in my driveway. "Oh, I see you brought equipment with you," she said, giving it a side glance like it was an infestation. Then her eyes locked on the old, rugged, barbed wire fence that ran along the back half of my lot. "That fence will have to go," she said. Just like that. I raised an eyebrow. "That fence is on my land, and it's been here longer than this neighborhood." She smiled politely, but there was a twitch in her left cheek. "Yes, but per HOA bylaws, non-decorative fencing must be uniform and approved by the board. We maintain a visual standard." I didn't move here for a visual standard. I moved here because the land is mine. That's when it started. The passive-aggressive letters, the warning notices. Then came the official violation report in the mail, citing me for unauthorized fencing and threatening a fine of $500 per week if I didn't remove it. I contacted the county office and verified that my property was grandfathered in. The fence was legal. Sandra didn't care. She began making appearances during the day, sometimes standing in front of my lot, snapping photos of the fence. Once I caught her measuring the height of it, muttering to herself. She even tried to say it was a safety hazard for children, despite the fact that there were no kids living on either side of me. I tried to reason with her. I even offered to put a wooden cover on the front-facing portion to beautify it. She refused. According to her, the fence wasn't about appearance, it was about control. I realized quickly that she wasn't interested in compromise. She wanted the fence gone, period. I began to feel watched. When I mowed my lawn, her SUV would idle just down the road. When I walked my dog past her house, she'd appear on her porch like clockwork. The whole neighborhood seemed afraid of her. People whispered but never challenged her publicly. Everyone else had complied with her suggestions. So she wasn't used to being told no. But I wasn't like everyone else. That fence reminded me of my life before all this. It wasn't just wire and posts. It was a symbol of where I'd come from. It was part of who I was, and I wasn't about to rip it down just because some retired bureaucrat decided she needed another win to hang on her clipboard. That's when I realized this was more than a disagreement. It was a war Sandra had declared, and I had no intention of losing it. The letters didn't stop. Neither did the fines. Every week, I'd find another notice from the HOA stuffed into my mailbox or taped to my front door like a parking ticket. Sandra's tone became more aggressive with each one. What started as friendly recommendations had turned into legal threats. She accused me of violating aesthetic standards, endangering children, even creating an unattractive and unsafe atmosphere for the community. All because of a damn barbed wire fence on my land that had stood for over 70 years. But it wasn't just paper harassment anymore. I began noticing more disturbing signs that Sandra was escalating things. It started with tire tracks. At first I chalked them up to a maintenance truck or some local kids joyriding through the overgrown brush that separated my backyard from the undeveloped stretch of land behind it. But after a few days, I realized these weren't random. The tracks cut right through the wild grass behind my fence, heading toward the very edge of my property. One morning I found fresh tread marks, and the padlock on my rear gate looked like someone had tried to mess with it. That's when I decided to check my cameras. I had 2 trail cams set up facing the ravine and back, mostly for wildlife. They weren't high-tech, but they caught enough. Sure enough, one clip from just past midnight showed a vehicle creeping along the brush, headlights off. The grainy footage showed the unmistakable outline of a white Lexus SUV, Sandra's. She had no business being back there. That part of the land wasn't public, wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, and sure as hell wasn't a walking trail. The Bihao. Only reason she'd be snooping around was if she was either looking for something or planning something. I sat with that thought for a long time. Then an idea started forming. It wasn't vengeful. It was practical, defensive. If she was going to keep trying to pressure me, or worse, trespass, I needed to make a point she wouldn't forget. I didn't want to involve the police, not yet. That would just trigger more HOA drama and potentially make me look like the aggressor. What I wanted was deterrence. So I built a cattle guard trap. If you've never seen one, a cattle guard looks like a solid patch of dirt or ground from afar. But really, it's a pit lined with metal grates, wide, enough to make it impossible for vehicles or hooved animals to cross. Step on it, and your tire, or hoof, slips between the bars. Ranchers have used them for generations to keep cattle from wandering while letting vehicles pass over if they know where to drive. But mine wasn't meant to be crossed. I didn't advertise it. I didn't even place warning signs. I installed it just inside the back entrance of my property, tucked between 2 bushes, where I suspected Sandra had driven through before. From a distance, it just looked like compacted dirt. I even threw a little dust and straw over it to make it blend. And then I waited. 2 nights later, just past 1 a.m., I was woken by a horrible metallic crunch, followed by the unmistakable sound of a car horn going off and someone shouting. I grabbed my flashlight, pulled on my boots, and rushed out to the back gate. What I found was almost too perfect. Sandra's white Lexus SUV was nose deep into the cattle guard trap. Her front tires had dropped completely into the grate, and the front bumper was practically peeled off like a sardine can. The undercarriage was bent. One of her headlights was shattered. She was outside the vehicle, pacing in panic, talking frantically into her phone. Her voice was shrill, furious. When she saw me, she pointed and screamed, "You're going to jail for this! This is entrapment! You set a trap on purpose!" I calmly pointed out that she was on private property, that there were signs at every legal access point, that her SUV had crossed an unpaved trail that belonged to me. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. That was the moment she realized this wasn't going her way anymore.